Welcome, friends. This is Historical AF. I'm Keena.
I'm Emily.
I'm Kelly.
We are two history podcasts delivering the weird and historical puppy nuggets you never knew you needed in your ear holes. And now that I've said puppy nuggets, I instantly regret it. But thanks for joining me again.
Puppy nuggets could be like baby puppies, or they can be puppy poops. Either one.
I was thinking like eating, and then I was like, oh no.
Oh yeah, see, I didn't go that way.
Oh, I went terrible places.
I've called this one a nugget before.
I love Pug so much.
She's like asleep, like, Mom, why are you picking me up?
Mine's on the floor asleep. She'll start snoring here in a little bit. It's a little ambiance for the background noise for you guys.
You know, it'll be like stereo because yours will do it and then mine will do it and it'll be great.
It's super authentic. We have a bunch of dogs on the dog podcast. Like,
yes, absolutely.
This is real.
Method podcasting.
Yeah. Yes. Getting into character.
Well, I'm so glad you guys joined me again. I had so much fun last time you guys were here. And just refresh everybody's memory about your podcast.
So we are Whining About Herstory, women's history podcast where we pair fine wine with fine ladies from history that you probably haven't heard of. So we're not going to be covering Amelia Earhart or Marie Curie. We're covering people like Marsha P. Johnson, Pudgy Stockton. If you don't recognize any of those names, then our podcast is for you because they will become like your dream girls.
Or if you just like best friends and badass babes, we'd probably be for you too.
Yes.
Yes. If I didn't already listen, I'd be subscribing now.
Done.
I love Marsha P. Johnson so much.
Oh my God. Amazing. Hers made me cry.
Yeah.
And then I went to a pride parade like the same summer that I covered her, and someone had a sign with her face on it, and I straight up started crying. I was like, Marsha, you deserve so much better.
Yeah.
There was a study that came out that said that there was a 60% increase in LGBTQ plus people, and people are like losing their minds. But all I could think of is like, we finally live in a time in history where people are comfortable being their authentic self.
That's what it is.
Yeah. And just think back to like Marsha P. Johnson, like how horrific she was treated and how people were so scared. And Stonewall in general, like everybody there was, they're in secret. And it makes my heart happy to know that today that, kids in high school are coming out. And that never happened when I was in high school. I'm like,
right.
It's not like more gay people. That's what was killing me about the comments and the people retweeting being like, what is happening? I'm like, no, it just means that we're finally evolving as a society to be more accepting.
Well, it's like,
what's happening? We're not being a bunch of assholes.
Like, that's come out with mental health too, that people are like, oh, people are getting diagnosed more. I'm like, no, people are seeking help more.
Yeah, the stigma is finally, there's still such a stigma. And like, even in the tweet that I did, it's like people are still being disowned and beaten in the streets. Like, that's still happening.
It's so sad.
And it's horrific. But at least we live in a time where people are more accepting, I think. Because now you see, like, Twitter handles, everybody has their pronouns. And that would have never happened even like 5 years ago, I think. So I'm very proud of humans right now. Because a little like ray of sunshine peeking through the shitty clouds.
I was gonna say, we need to like hang on to good news like that for dear life.
Yeah. All I could think of, because I ran a teen center and I just remembered thinking one time like how comfortable some of the teens were just being out, and I'm like, this would have never happened when I was a kid, and it just warms my little cold heart. Oh,
it really is so good to see.
Hopefully maybe the next generation, like, nobody will have to be afraid, and just makes me happy.
Well, and that's the cool thing. It's gonna just get better. The more people who are out, the more you can't ignore them. The harder it is to force them into hiding, which is why we have this idea that LGBTQ plus people are like a new invention or a trend or something stupid like that. They've literally always been here. We just will not talk about them. And society kind of did their best to force them underground or straight up eliminate them from society. And now people are out, they're proud. We have such a long way to go, but we've come a huge amount of distance. Also, I love that Dion wrote that they have their pronouns in their email signatures at work. And I'm
love that.
That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, that's incredible. So I also know that APA writing guide added they as a non-gender identifier. And I was like, well, that is amazing. So anyway, puppies.
Yeah.
Puppers.
So tell me about your fur babies.
I was going to say, I'll let Kelly go first because she has the visual aids on hand.
I have 3 pugs. This is my youngest. She's half asleep and probably mad at me right now.
That face!
This is Navi. She's an apricot pug, and she's like 4. And then we have Dory, who's a fawn pug, little chunky one. Not like as chunky as, like, if you think of a normal pug and they're like little barrels, none of my dogs look like that. But Dory's our middle child, she was a crack dog when we first got her. Because she was rescued from outside a known crack house. So she was a little insane for like the first 2 years that we had her, but she's a really good dog now.
She didn't stop moving.
Yeah, like literally her rest period was like she would sit down for like literally 30 seconds and then just be on the move again.
That
She
poor
liked to
baby.
poop outside Emily's door.
Yeah, she was a bitch.
And then when she like mastered going outside, she would go outside of Emily's window.
Because my room was kind of like in the ground. So my window was level with the ground. And yeah, she'd shit outside my window and my door because fuck her. I love her, but Jesus.
And then our oldest is a black pug named Atari, who is 14.
Oh, I love the names too.
Dory, short for Commodore.
That's incredible.
Not Dory the fish, although she acts like Dory the fish. So my husband's a nerd, so Atari is obviously after the Atari video game. Dory is Commodore after the Commodore 64, which was like one of the first computers.
Oh yeah.
And then Navi is after Navi from Legend of Zelda.
I love that so much.
And she's totally Navi because she'll bark. She'll be like, hey, listen.
And she used to have the collar that said, hey, listen on it, but then she got old.
Look at that face.
Yeah, they're my babies. I have no children. I have dogs.
Same.
Okay. I went to grab 1 chi.
You got 2 cheese?
And I ended up with 2 cheese.
Like I grabbed Atari and then Dory was all up here like, Mom, love me instead.
This little guy is Charlie. He's the first dog I've ever had. I was always a cat person, but I loved him and Kelly was allergic to cats, so I had to get a dog. And then this little squirrely dude is Max. My boyfriend's parents had a couple of dogs, Buddy and Max. Buddy sadly passed away and Max has been feeling real lonely. So he's been kind of staying with us. It may be a permanent situation because I fucking love him and I don't want him to leave and I want to be his mommy. But we don't want to just be like, he's our dog now, no takesy backsies, you know? But
you gotta wait like 6 months to do that.
Yeah. I'm just kind of waiting to get him neutered because he still has his balls. And then I do have a pit bull who's in the other room and he's too big to fit in my lap. Not that he knows that, but so I got 2 cheese and a pity.
Oh, I just love them so much. This has been such a theme just because I'm such a shameless dog mom.
Right?
Obsessed with them. I love all things dogs. Did you guys want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
We can certainly go first. I'm very excited about my topic. I don't know why I'm saying mine. It's because I think it's because my boyfriend suggested it, so I've been obsessing about it for a month.
Emily just doesn't want me to be here. She was like, I guess Kelly has to come with me.
I need someone to say I'm funny.
Is that what my eye rolls tell you? Is that you're funny?
No, it's that you don't laugh at me. You say, "Oh, you're funny." You're like, "Oh, that's so funny," but you don't laugh at me. And then when I can get you to laugh, it's like it is crack. Like it's the best thing in the world. Like, oh, I got Kelly to laugh.
Oh, that's funny.
How long have you guys known each other? It's been
oh god,
forever.
We
right?
met in 2009, freshman year of college.
Yeah.
Oh wow!
So over 10 years now.
Oh,
which is insane.
I was about to say that's just wrong. That's like a decade away.
Right?
I refuse to admit that I am old.
Our last episode, actually, on Monday, we talk about how it's our birthdays and we're entering a new decade, and it's sad and depressing.
Yeah, my birthday was in December, but now I'm officially closer to 40 than 30, and I'm like, uh-oh.
This is too much.
I just hit 30 this last Sunday. And to celebrate tomorrow, I'm going to the zoo and I'm going to act like a 5-year-old.
Yes.
It.
Oh, I love the zoo. And on behalf of everybody, happy birthday again.
Oh, thank
Yay.
you. Let's do this. So, today, for all of your listening pleasures, we are covering mercy dogs.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Dogs have served in battle as early as 600 BC. As far as we know, probably earlier.
Yeah, probably as soon as they were domesticated, people were like, attack!
Yeah. They were either fighting dogs or fighting with dogs, but dogs are warriors, especially my cheese who are getting into it right now.
My dogs are not warriors.
Yeah,
Unless
Shaw
someone's
was
at the
never
front door.
forgot.
Your dogs are tanks. Mine are rogues. So battle borks have done just about everything from serving in combat roles to acting as scouts. But today, we're not jumping into battle. We're going to talk about dogs that played a critical role after the battle was over.
Imagine, if you will, you're a soldier serving in World War I, or as you know it, the Great War. Because what are the chances of something like this happening twice?
Oh, yeah.
Those poor, blissfully ignorant fools.
Right?
I know, especially because the first one they called War to End All Wars. And then they're like, well,
you're like,
shit.
oh, if only.
Yeah.
Trench warfare, which was very typical for World War I, is hell. When you're in the trench, you're plagued by lice, disease, and the ever-present threat of attack or mental breakdown. When you're ordered to go over the top of the trench, you're charging into a barrage of artillery fire, bullets, gas, and landmines, or the worst of the worst, sniper fire. So in World War I, the trench soldiers likely thanked whatever remained of their lucky stars for the lethal weapon like terriers, which used to slay endless rivers of rats they were forced to live with. Beyond all the praises spoken of terriers for controlling rats in the trenches, when it comes to a favorite role that canines played during the Great War, my vote goes hands down to what was known as the casualty dogs or mercy dogs.
So let's say you manage to miss all the artillery fire and the bullets and the gas and the landmines and the snipers. But let's say you get hit by a piece of shrapnel from a mortar that goes off somewhere nearby. Now, you're face down in the mud, trapped in no man's land, unable to move, but still alive.
You don't know how long you've been lying there, but the pain in your side is immense. You hear the distant groans of the wounded and dying around you. Then, a new sound, far off at first, but growing louder quickly. Panting.
Suddenly, a dog fitted with a white saddlebag, decorated with a large red cross, approaches. The saddlebag is filled with all the battlefield necessities. First aid, water, and liquor, because God knows you need some liquor. Plus, it sanitizes stuff if you have your wits about you.
You're able to use the first aid supplies to bandage the wound on your stomach, and this will buy you time until medics can help you get back to your trench.
You will survive the war, live to tell your grandkids about it, and the daring doggo that saved your life.
Oh, I got chills.
So who were these courageous canines?
Mercy dogs, also known as ambulance dogs, Red Cross dogs, or casualty dogs. They were specifically trained to canvass battlefields after combat, searching for wounded soldiers in need of aid.
Before being sent into the battlefields, the dogs were trained under realistic battle conditions. After a few weeks of training, they were ready to serve their country. They knew which soldiers to help by the type of uniform they wore. Like, they would straight up discriminate against you if they were like, no, you're not one of my guys. Fuck yourself.
It's crazy. So in wartime, these dogs would test the air, or air scenting as they called it, for traces of living human scent. And once these canines latched onto that scent and tracked it to an injured soldier or some poor soldier who'd managed to conceal himself or lay wounded in some obscure point of the battlefield, they would not let go of that scent.
They were normally sent out at night into no man's land, which was, for anyone who doesn't know, the ground between the two opposing trenches. So this is like where all the shit went down. When the battles were not raging, to locate the injured men. Their keen sense of smell and good night vision gave them the advantage of finding soldiers in the dark without bringing much attention from the enemy.
And as we mentioned before, if the soldier they found was severely wounded, they were often, not always, equipped with a saddlebag that had these supplies that the wounded soldier could hopefully help themselves.
Now, what if these heroic pooches found someone who was alive but unable to help themselves? You know, a lot of bad things go down in war, and you could be alive but completely out of it. Not to worry, these genius dogs would take a piece of the soldier's uniform, like a helmet or a belt, and bring it back to a paramedic that was back in their home trench, and then lead them to the wounded soldier. Sometimes they would carry their own leashes in their mouths to indicate that they had found someone who needed help. Because a lot of these dogs were trained in different ways and they had different calls and signs. A rescue party would then trail the dog back to the wounded soldier, and the time saved in locating the injured often meant the difference between life and death, especially in locations far too difficult for a search party of humans to pinpoint. Because a lot of these soldiers, if you're wounded, you don't want to be out in the middle of nowhere. So they would hide in, under rocks or behind like they would conceal themselves to not be spotted by the enemy. Well, it also makes it really hard for your side to find you if you're dying.
Yeah, it's not like you can yell for help or anything either.
Right.
Right. You don't know who's going to show up.
Wow.
Many different breeds were used as mercy dogs or Red Cross dogs, including German Shepherds, sheepdogs, Arendelle Terriers, bloodhounds, retrievers, and collies. Boxers were often used due to their loyalty. According to the Red Cross, it was more about the character of the dog, not the breed itself. And the dogs knew to help only those who were still alive. They were taught to distinguish between the dead and the unconscious. If a soldier was dead, the dog would move on. If the soldier was dying, the dog would remain with him to offer him comfort so that he would not die alone.
Oh my God, my heart.
I'm not crying, you're crying. I'm fine. Can you imagine? Like, I think if I was going into war and I knew if I died, a dog would be with me, I'd be a little bit
more okay with it.
Yeah. At that comfort, you just can't. There's just, even if it was like a loved one, if I knew that he died with the comfort with
little puppers.
Right.
These dogs were so good at triaging wounded soldiers that one military surgeon said, quote, "They sometimes lead us to the bodies we think have no life in them. But when we bring them back to the doctors, they always find a spark. It is purely a matter of their instinct, which is far more effective than man's reasoning powers." So people who are dying and would have otherwise been left to do so were saved because of these dogs.
Wow.
Can you imagine being injured on the battlefield and while still alive, your own comrades think you're dead and move on? That is hell. So thank God for these dogs.
Yeah.
In certain cases, dogs would even drag soldiers away from the danger and acted as furry little ambulances, pulling carts to help transport the wounded. They're like little fuzzy workhorses.
Oh, that's cute.
These little babies.
So mercy dogs first became utilized by the German army in the late 1800s, and they were actually originally called, why did I put German in here?
I literally did not put that in here when I first wrote the notes because I was not going to pronounce it.
They were originally called Sanitation or sanitary hounds, and they started as what was known as, quote unquote, a novel experiment, but became a worldwide phenomenon.
Oh, wow.
So they would typically be trained by the nation's Red Cross Society, and these woofers were so damn good, they could actually differentiate between their nation's soldiers and those of the enemy, kind of like we said before. Yes, the fearless floofs would totally blow you off if you weren't on their side, as well as be able to tell if a man was unconscious or dead. The difference between moving on and staying. Like, people can't even do this. Like, we've already established they're doing a better job than people. And the fact that a dog can tell between like a German soldier and a French soldier blows my mind, because if you told me to figure out which one was which, unless like the Germans have the little spiky helmets, I probably couldn't tell you. That's all I know about German military uniforms from this era.
Funny.
They all had horns.
Mercy dogs are most commonly associated with their services in World War I. Germany, who had started the war woofer trend, used approximately 30,000 dogs during World War I. Wow. And this is an insane number, considering it's estimated that 50,000 plus were used during the war in total. So that means Germany was using about over half of the dogs total used in this war.
That is insane.
Of these dogs, about 10,000 are estimated to have been mercy dogs, and these dogs are credited with saving thousands of lives.
That's incredible.
While mercy dogs are best known for serving in World War I, they were also utilized in World War II, and the United States used them in the Korean War, and they mainly used, German Shepherds, which are pretty standard for like police and military dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Even off the battlefield, these dogs continue to help those who need them. There's a growing list of organizations that pairs veterans with therapy dogs. From helping veterans with visible disabilities to helping those with mental trauma, these patriotic puppers, battle-tested booper snoots, daring doggos, and warrior woofers all deserve some heckin' sweet snuggles and salute.
Here.
And actually, my boyfriend, his dog is not like a trained therapy dog, but an emotional support animal. And there was a period in our lives where the dog Rocky couldn't be with us, and you could tell the difference. Yeah. Like they make such an impact.
Yes, they do, you whiny little chi. Yes, they do.
Oh yeah, Zeke says all the time that Ruger saved his life because Zeke, in 15 years of service, he deployed 11 times.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah, and the Iraq ones were really bad. So, having Ruger really is just, they can tell too. Like, even if he starts to get kind of like Ruger immediately knows, and he's extra cute and cuddly and calms him down. And they're incredible. Like, they're too pure for this world. Like, I don't think we deserve dogs. They're just too good.
So Kelly was kind enough to include a story about a specific mercy dog who's a little smaller than you might think, and this dog is Rags.
One such mercy dog was named Rags, a stray terrier from the streets of Paris. American soldiers fed him, and Rags, in return, followed them back to their camp, where he was promptly adopted by the U.S. 1st Infantry Division. And Rags stayed with the troops even as they marched into hell that were the frontline trenches.
Rags had originally been taught to deliver messages, but due to his intense sense of hearing, soon learned to forewarn soldiers of incoming artillery shells by tossing himself onto his side, which is what Max does every time I try to pet him. He's like,
"You're an oncoming artillery shell."
I am. I'm the bomb. So Rags also developed a knack for finding injured soldiers amongst the battlefield dead. Yup. As a jack of all trades, Rags additionally served as a casualty dog. This scruffy 24-pound terrier would bring back a piece of a uniform to alert medics and soldiers that an American soldier was wounded and in need of rescue. This blows my mind because a lot of these dogs are trained by the Red Cross, and this is just a little terrier who's like, I'm here. Let's do this. Let's fuck some shit up. I feel like terriers have that personality, though, where they're like, let's go. Let's break some things. I'm going to burn.
Well, like I put in the beginning, like they were used a lot in World War I, to clean the trenches of rats. And it would take only a matter of like hours to just completely destroy an infestation of rats because they were so good at their job.
Kelly, I know you have a couple of terrier neighbors. Do you look at them with a little more respect, or do they still annoy the hell out of you?
Okay, first of all, we live in Minnesota. I don't understand why you would put a dog door in anyways. But putting a dog door in when you have dogs that just stand out on your deck and bark all day is not responsible. Anyways. So Rags eventually would go on to take too many wounds himself. He would be gassed, shelled, and partially blinded, and would have to retire from the front lines. He recovered, though, and was taken to America, and after the war was adopted by a military family. He lived to be 20 and was buried at Aspen Hill Memorial Park in Silver Springs, Maryland, with full military honors and much fanfare.
Oh my God, I love that so much.
I love his name was Rags. Like,
he was a street dog from Paris, so they probably were just like, sure.
You look like shit. We're gonna call you Rags.
Having 24-pound little terrier. That's probably why he didn't get caught by anyone. No one could find him.
That just blows my mind. Like, all those other dogs are trained, and he's like, figure it out.
Right?
Yeah.
He just picked it up.
They're smart. So Max, he's kind of new to the house and we're trying to teach him to sit and do some of the other commands. And he's watching our other dogs who are really used to, sitting and lying down and all that. And he's copying them. Like he's picking it up so quickly because he's watching what they do. And he's being like, oh snap, they're getting treats. I'm gonna copy them and maybe oh crap, I'm getting treats. This is awesome.
Right. That's what I was gonna say. Is I was like, I bet he took cues from the other military dogs.
Mm-hmm. We'll talk about it at the end of mine, but yeah, dogs are able to perceive any kind of gesture, even down to your eye movements of humans, and no other animal on the planet can do that. Even our closest relatives, like chimpanzees and stuff, they can't read humans the way dogs can.
That is wild. Yeah. Dogs are truly otherworldly. Also, I love Marissa because she wrote, Emily goes to love on the puppy. Here comes the boom.
So I read that, and then for some reason, all I can think of is I'm like, I wonder how many times of that dog throwing itself on its side did it take them to realize what he was doing?
Can you imagine being like, God damn it, guys, figure this out.
Right? They're all just going,
come on.
Trying to save your life here. Pay attention.
They're all just cooing over him like, oh, Rags is being cute. Boom.
Oh, shit. Yeah, right.
Wow. That was incredible. Oh, my little heart is just, I love it so much. And I love the history of animals in like wartime because a lot of times they offer comfort. And I imagine if you're in like the worst war ever and you have an animal by you, it would make it somewhat just like even the tiniest bit better. If anything can bring anybody just the slightest bit of comfort. Well, mine's not as wholesome.
Okay, that's fine. Not everything can be wholesome.
I know. Mine's a little bit more sciencey, but it's pretty cool. Since we learned about the domestication of cats a few weeks back, I decided I need to know about dogs. I was honestly not prepared for how incredibly fascinating this was. This topic is also very exciting because some of the newest information actually came out in January of this year, 2021. So this is very super new.
Ooh, I'm excited.
We are on the cutting edge right now.
Right? So buckle up, cuddle your pupper, and prepare to geek the fuck out with me.
Yay. Oh, jeez. I look up and there's a key.
He's the one who his ears never fully became straight, so one of his ears is always flopped. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
I love that there's so many dogs right now. I'm so
I started picking up my youngest dog, but then my oldest dog looks sad, so I picked her up instead, and now my youngest dog is looking at me all offended. She's like, Mom!
Mom! All right, so it turns out that researchers have identified the origins of cattle, horses, pigs, sheep, camels, ducks, chickens, cats, and goats. But, and this brings me to why I'm considering this my weird segment, is because the origins of domesticated dogs has been very fuzzy. And I find it weird because dogs are our oldest companion. They're the first domesticated animal, and they are the most varied, numerous, and widely distributed domestic animal worldwide. And yet, we don't know much about them.
We're like, we don't know how they became domesticated. They just did.
It just happened.
Someone just cuddled a wolf into submission, and the wolf was like, I could get used to this. I dig this. And that was it.
If reincarnation is real, then my ancient self was like, let me love you.
Right.
Let's pour one out to all the people who got mauled trying to domesticate wolves.
Cheers. Oh, I totally would have been that person.
Yeah, I do too.
So the general consensus is that they appeared at least 14 to 15,000 years ago with mobile bands of human hunter-gatherers. And this would have been about 5,000 years before humans domesticated crops and farm animals. So this is a really long time in history before humans were settling down. So fascinating. The earliest confirmed domestic dog anywhere so far has been from a burial site in Germany called Von Oberkassel. My German sucks, I'm sorry. Which has joint human and dog interments dated 14,000 years ago. And there's various examples throughout the world of dogs getting human-like burials, which means that they're very important. You're not going to give an animal ceremonial rites if they don't mean something to you.
Well, and especially like I know people would sometimes be buried with horses, it's like if you're a warrior and that's a status thing, but like a utilitarian animal, you're not going to be buried with a cow or a
Yeah.
sheep. Like there's obviously some kind of either a status symbol or an emotional connection to that.
Hmm. Absolutely. The earliest confirmed domesticated dog in China was found in the early Neolithic, so 7,000 to 5,800 BCE at the Jihu site in Henan province. So these go really back. Evidence for coexistence of dogs and humans, but not necessarily domestication, comes from the Upper Paleolithic sites in Europe. These hold evidence for dog interaction with humans and include the Lord help me. Okay, the Goyette Cave in Belgium, the Chauvet Cave in France, the Primosti in Czech Republic, European Mesolithic sites like Skateholm, which is 5,250 BCE, in Sweden have dog burials, proving the value of free beasts in all the hunter-gatherer settlements. And there's even some in the US. So Danger Cave in Utah is currently the earliest case of dog burial in the Americas at 11,000 years ago. Utah. Blew my mind. I was like, all right, Utah, see you. And it was likely a descendant of Asian dogs. Continued interbreeding with wolves, a characteristic found throughout the history of dogs everywhere, has apparently resulted in a hybrid black wolf found in the Americas. Black fur coloration is a dog characteristic, but not originally found in wolves. And then last episode, we talked about the Sholo dog, and that dog came over the Bering Strait, like with the people. So it's just, we're talking deep history here. Very, very, very long time ago. So we're going to start with the history of studying dogs. We're going to work our way to like what we think today. Yay, science. Science and brains and stuff. Love it. I think my husband is convinced I hate science because I hate math. And I'm like, there's some science that's not all math. I like that one.
Growing up, I loved science, especially like weather and dinosaurs, biology. Like there are a lot of sciences I was super into as a kid. I've always been shit at math though. Mm-hmm. I hate math. I hate it so much. And I was a little disappointed on how much math goes into science. I was like, damn it, no. Keep them separate. But like science, you can be interested in science and hate math. It's possible.
Absolutely. I'm like number dyslexic, so I'm just miserable. I hate it.
Mm-hmm.
Do not like. Thank God for
I have a learning disability that makes math a nightmare. Figured that one out my junior year of high school, which was just in time to do absolutely nothing about it.
Right? Like too far in to actually like matter.
Yeah, for me to like learn any coping skills or anything.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't learn that I was dyslexic till college. And I'm like, oh, no wonder I don't get anything because every foundation that my education is built on, I didn't know what I was doing. Great.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's fun. All right. So we begin with the study of patterns and diversity called systematics. It's the subdivision of evolutionary biology, which I fucking love evolution. Evolutionary psychology was probably the coolest class I ever took in my entire life.
That sounds amazing.
It was so much fun, even down to like, why do you kiss people? Like the evolutionary.
Why do we? It's so weird, right?
It is, but there's.
But
like
I love it.
There's things of like pheromones and even just like saliva and taste and stuff is like a way of showing attraction. And then, women, like our cycles were more attractive at certain parts of our cycles. Like it's so what, like your face becomes slightly more symmetrical when you're ovulating, which makes you more attractive. And like women will be more attracted to men that are wealthy and can give support most of their cycle. But when they're ovulating, they want the big, strong men. It's like evolutionary stuff is wild. And then all of it makes no sense now because we don't need any of that to survive. So now it's just messed up.
It's just like,
now we're all just like a bunch of fucking weirdos.
Yeah.
Are you ovulating because you look great?
I know. I've also talked about like anxiety and like ADHD and stuff. And so like early humans, if your brain was going that fast and you were scared of things, you survived. And that's why your type of genetics survived, is because you were able to think fast and anticipate danger. And now we're just all fucking nervous wrecks.
Right.
That need medication. Like ancient me would have been doing great. I don't know.
If my ancient ancestors knew that not getting eaten by a tiger would turn me into a basket case, I think they would have just got eaten by the tiger.
If they knew what we were
If only they knew what they've done.
Yay, evolution. So systematic researchers were earlier called naturalists and taxonomists. They sorted species genealogical relationships and estimated the points at which populations diverged from one another. Usually they relied on observations like physical traits, so like their teeth, skulls, and sometimes fossils. But then we got that sweet, sweet DNA and added genome-wide comparison to the mix. And that's why we're starting to finally unlock the secrets. It's so cool.
DNA!
And also, it's super fascinating. If you haven't listened to the cat episode, Cats Part 1, we talk about DNA tracing in cats, which also show that cats were domesticated like 11,000 years ago, way before we thought. Because I always thought, like, oh, yeah, Egypt, like a little bit before that. Nope. Way before that. So it's just so cool that our entire understanding of history is now being rewritten because we can read DNA. Geeking out. Canis lupus familiaris exhibits the most variability in shape, size, behavior, and temperament of any other mammal species living on Earth. About 1 billion dogs, a population larger than any other domesticated subspecies, roams the world. Canine fossils, some dating as long ago as 36,000 years, has been found on every single continent except Antarctica.
So far.
Yes.
It's because we don't want to dig up there. It's so cold. There's like 80 billion dog bones under that ice. The big foofers were just like rolling around in the snow having the best time. We just are not brave enough to find them.
Right.
Well, what's wild is that because of global warming and a lot of ice caps and shit are melting, like they found that dog in, was it Siberia, that still had its fur? Like it was almost completely intact because the permafrost is thawing out. So they had a perfect specimen. It still had like its tongue and stuff. Like it's wild.
I don't know if I love that.
Yeah, it's if you Google it, like full thing of hair, it's wild because I just found it in a block of ice that was melting. So there's no telling what we'll find.
I'm going to Google ancient dead dog with tongue and we'll see what happens.
Do hair. I bet the hair will show up first. We also need to take in consideration that an extreme variation can occur in as little as one generation. So it's like evolution on speed. So it's pretty understandable why classifying domestic dogs has been such a bitch. And that's not even taking into account that this family also includes wolves, jackals, foxes, and then dogs. Literally everything is against you trying to figure out dogs.
You're so confusing. Why?
I know, right? A lot of people have tried to crack this canine code. In the 4th century BCE, theories of the spelled that wrong. The descent, not decent. Oh, I'm smart. So, in the 4th century BCE, theories of the descent of animals were mostly philosophical approaches to relate organic life to the history of time. So, philosophers wanted to know how organic life forms were related, but not where they came from. They didn't care. Greek philosopher Aristotle, ever heard of him, endorsed the idea that natural beings were always here and always would be. So, can you imagine how much his brain would explode if he heard about extinction?
Right.
One word, dinosaurs. What if I told you that bird flying above our heads used to weigh 2 tons, walk on 2 legs, and eat giant animals? And then they burn me for being a witch or something.
Yes, absolutely. So he commented on the dog's origin, not in the respect to the animal's continuous chronological past, but rather in terms of breed creation. In his view, the dog that nature created was bred to a fox to make a small dog, and then a bear to make a big dog.
Can you imagine trying to get a bear and a dog to fuck each other?
I don't want to imagine that.
Do you light candles? Like what gets them into each other? How does that work?
Music. It's all music.
Who mounts who?
It's so funny.
The smaller has to be the male, otherwise birthing would not go well.
Oh, yeah. Yikes. The big part of this is that he was one of the first people to think, like, well, breeds are created by humans. So he was kind of onto something there because humans did breed different kinds of dogs. But also, in his view, dogs always existed. Early on, people are like, evolution, who's she? We don't know her. As time went on, the earliest naturalists came to understand that species were related in more complicated ways, and then they tried to classify them. The theological context emerged, stating that a specific act of omnipotent creator transformed all living things whole and complete. So there's no evolution to see here either. Now we got God involved.
Whoa.
What a cop-out.
The revolutionary notion that every animal might not be a singular divine creation didn't actually materialize until the late Middle Ages, and it was a contradiction that had to be explored hypothetically to avoid conflict with any religious doctrine. At this point, you're trying to science, but you can't science because science might aggravate your God, so you gotta just back away slowly. 16th century English cleric Edward Topsell was the author of The History of Four-Footed Beasts. Was really into fire and brimstone religion, so that's fun. He seems like a great guy to hang out with.
Super fun at parties.
Yes.
Ironically, he gets really upbeat when he gets drunk. It's super weird.
And he based a lot of his categories on morality. I guess it's not a huge stretch if you think about the point that a wolf is like super vicious and mean, and then a dog is so cute and cuddly, so good and evil and all that shit. Very extremes. Right, like there's no gray area in that kind of, what was that, 16th century religion? Yikes. Okay. 18th century, France leading naturalist and the father of paleontology, Georges Cuvier, I think, introduced a new way of looking at life and death. Although he was firmly in the camp of divine creationism, he theorized that animals would eventually become extinct. We're starting to get somewhere.
I was going to say, those are facts.
Yeah.
Also, I didn't realize that the origin of dogs and their domestication involved so much Jesus.
Right?
It's so theological. Like, why?
So at this point, you can tell that they're really close to figuring out evolution, but they didn't want to. So it was making it very difficult to get anywhere because they're just like, but Jesus. We can't, because
all
Jesus.
this, but Jesus.
We can't do that because Jesus. Sorry, Jesus.
Jesus never lets us have any fun.
Domesticated farm livestock had derived from prey species. Also means that dogs are the only predator species to be domesticated. So that was messing with people's heads too. Because they're like, well, we don't understand. Like, how did this happen? It's not happening anywhere else. And then when I thought of that, I was like, that's true. Because everything else we domesticated are like dumb little chickens. And like chickens are sweet, but they are dumb and very much prey.
Yeah. Unless a mouse gets in the coop and then they eviscerate it.
Oh, yeah. That.
But like on our level of food chain.
Yeah, for sure. Chicken is delicious.
I have scars from roosters. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm like,
they can be mean, but they're not going to eat us unless thousands of them swarm us at once.
There's a horror movie. You know how they have like the weird, like the birds be like
the birds and crows and chickens.
Oh yeah, me and roosters don't get along. Like even in college one time in a city, I got chased by a rooster once, and I'm like, what is happening?
Have you ever heard those stories about like someone who pisses off a crow and then like 10 generations of crow make it their personal mission to wreck this person's life?
That happened to my mom's
What
dog.
did you do to a rooster? Did you like kick one when you were a kid? Like
my mom's dog like chased a crow and like scared it, and then now every time he goes outside, there's like 50 of them in the trees above, like clawing at him, and now he's afraid to go outside.
It is my dream to like become favorable for crows.
Oh, yeah.
We have a ton of them where we live. To the point where like they swarm downtown, and so the city tries to do stuff to deter them. I'm like, no, let them feast. And there's actually a house in my neighborhood. This lady has a bunch of bird feeders in her front yard, and the yard is literally always swarmed with crows and sometimes some ducks. But I'm like, so she's a witch. That's how you tell where the witch is in your neighborhood. There's like a billion crows. I'm like, but here's the thing. She's going to be in trouble. Someone's going to try to shortchange her, or they're going to bump into her and not apologize, and then the crows will come.
Yeah. And then
oh, and if they like you, they bring you shiny stuff.
Yeah.
I need that in my life.
She's just got like a box full of diamonds that crows have given her.
I need to befriend some crows.
I want to be a crow lady real bad.
Oh, me too. Be a murder. They did find this one quote from just a random person in a document, and it said, quote, "How could such a noble animal as the dog be derived from the likes of the wolf? If evolution were true of dogs and wolves, wouldn't every beast choose to live the noble life?"
Some might just want to eat your face, though, and that's a choice.
That is true. And again, it must have been super frustrating to like crack this because you traveled the world, a cat looks like a cat, but not all dogs look the same at all. Like even my dogs are so wildly different. They don't have the same head shape. They don't have the same leg shape. Their fur is different. It's very difficult and confusing.
It is.
I'll give them the old ancient people a little slack here. It is very confusing. And the lack of understanding of the complexity of canine morphology made it difficult to unravel relationships among the ever-increasing numbers of dogs and dog-like animals being discovered, especially because now they're exploring and going to new countries. I mean, like, well, shit, there's another one, and it's even more different. BT dubs, morphology is the form of living organisms and the relationship between their structures, which, yes, all the structures of all dogs are so different. You know, compare a pit bull to a pug. It's wild to think they're related.
Right.
Yeah, it's like how do you describe what a dog looks like without you breaking it down to such basic characteristics where it's a cat now, like
or any other four-legged animal.
Exactly.
And then they also, as they're exploring new places, you know, I mentioned that last episode we had the Sholo dogs that came over on the Bering Strait. And so when they're coming back to America, they're realizing that these breeds that were introduced by European explorers or even before that were kind of returning to a feral state as civilizations collapsed. So like the Sholo dogs, the Aztec civilization completely was demolished by explorers. And a lot of those dogs went back into the jungles of Mexico and became slightly feral. And then as time went on, they started interbreeding with other dogs and wolves, and it became this like semi-feral, free-ranging canine. So it's even more confusing because we're like, well, we don't know where to even start with this.
I love all the confusions because dogs will just like fuck anything.
Yeah.
To transform into all these different shapes and styles. Like, hey, I'm little, but I will do that wolf. I will do that bear right here, right now. Let's do this. Like they just go and they're like, I can figure this out. I know where to put my parts.
Just like, don't threaten me with a good sign. Show me that bear. I'm going. God, I love dogs. And there was also a misunderstanding between the differences between a wild, tame, domestic, and feral dog because there's a very large spectrum.
Yeah.
Basically, this is just the history of how everybody got dogs wrong. So let's keep going. So the father of modern taxonomy, Carl Linus, assigned dogs, both wild and domestic, to groups based on their anatomy. So by muzzle, jaw, ear shape, tail carriage. So dogs' tails curve when they're relaxed, but a wolf doesn't. Also their hair texture, limb length, and behavior. These are all criteria that we still use today, which all those things are completely different in both my dogs. So Linus had a contemporary named Georges Luc Leclerc Comte de Buffon. Something I don't know French.
Buffoon, I like it.
And he referred to him as always eloquent, often incorrect.
Is that where we get the word buffoon from? Did this guy coin that because he was just such an idiot?
Maybe it's Buffon. I don't know. French is hard.
French is hard.
French is very hard.
It's a beautiful language that none of us can speak.
Absolutely. I tried. It took a semester and I did not retain any of that. The hillbilly made it so hard. So this guy suspected that changes in canine morphology were influenced by environmental pressures like climate, but his colleagues didn't consider this to be within an evolutionary context. So he's kind of getting into it too. Like, we're so close. So dividing dogs into categories based on skull shape was Cuvier's idea, and although his forward-thinking approach to paleontology and the history of organisms would seem to make him an advocate for evolution, he was not. He still was like, I'm there. I'm basically saying it, but I'm still don't believe in it.
But God.
Yeah, it's kind of like flat earthers. Like, I've seen pictures from space, still flat. I don't know.
I didn't say it wasn't a flat circle.
Can be round and flat.
So Cuvier's interest, after all, was in species demise, not its origin. So he didn't really get very far with that. But he did influence a dude named Charles Darwin. So there's that.
Oh, a name I know.
Yeah, we know this guy. So Darwin believed that the dog had multiple origins. You had wolves, jackals, and at least one in South America. He supported the latter by referencing his observations of dogs in Patagonia who swam underwater, and then an unusual dog he had seen in Central America, which I'm assuming is the Xolo dog because that's a very unusual dog in Central America. I'm a big fan of that dog. I'm convinced mine is half him. I don't know how one would end up in Arkansas, but it's the Mexican hairless. I keep saying Xolo, but yeah, the Mexican
that's kind of what he looks like, is the Mexican hairless.
Yeah. I need to DNA test him stat, but they're so expensive.
Yeah, they are.
I can't get myself to do it.
Oh, is that like the dog from Coco?
Yeah, Dante. Yeah.
Ah! Oh, he's like a giant, hairless, wrinkly chi.
Darwin advanced the idea of multi-regional domestication, and he also thought these small populations of quote-unquote inferior native dogs were eventually ousted by the migration of robust dogs introduced by Europeans. So that's another one of those things like colonialism was good.
Racism.
Yeah, it's very racist.
Is that dog imperialism?
It's like Europeans coming to America. Oh my god.
I'm so glad you picked up that too, because that's all I saw when I read that. I was like, oh damn, he racist. Okay.
Not even dog history is safe from this bullshit.
So true.
Thought we were safe.
You guys just need to erase all history.
History is a son of a bitch. The analogy kind of sucks, but it did kind of demonstrate the idea of survival of the fittest, and that's where he kind of went with the dogs. Anywho, the fundamental theory of origin is attributed to Darwin, and other taxonomists previously proposed similar ideas and connections, including Jean-Baptiste Lamarck and Alfred Russel Wallace. Unlike Lamarck and Wallace, however, Darwin suggested the evolutionary process occurred through natural selection. We've all heard of that.
Yeah.
But even though dogs helped explain natural selection, they still had no idea where the fuck they came from at this point. Like, it was the key to unlock evolution, but people are like, we still don't know. Like, it's fine. And then once science could start testing at the molecular level, that's when they began to challenge all these historical theories. So as early as 1970, research papers were published suggesting that dogs may have been derived from several different gray wolf populations, and that canine domestication may have happened much earlier than the fossils records about 15,000 years ago. And then by the 90s, geneticists worldwide were working together to build a comprehensive map that would chart the evolutionary journey of domesticated dogs.
Which is awesome.
I love it.
It's crazy that they can do that. Like, that's magic.
In the 90s, too. Like, technology was moving fast, but it was still pretty slow. Like, dial-up, computers were enormous, but the fact that they were already working on this just blows my mind. But, like, the path was not very smooth. Scientists didn't play well together, and they all had different opinions, and they were very set in their opinion on how things evolved. And they criticized each other's research, and they kind of undermined the collaboration process. Shocking.
That's a bummer. I hate when, like, egos get in the way of this stuff. Like, when you listen to true crime podcasts, you see it in law enforcement, you see it in science, you see it in everything where it's just a bunch of people like having a giant pissing contest. It's like, no, here's the thing. We're doing something greater than ourselves. We're trying to figure out dogs. There's no room here for your bullshit.
Exactly.
We must know where they came from.
Take me to the mother doggo. The dog that started it all.
Right.
And tricked humans into cleaning up its shit, because that is a smart dog.
That is true. I swear my dog holds it. So for his walk, we go around the block every day. I swear he just wants me to pick it up.
Oh, Charlie, when I take him for a walk, when we first go out, he poops. We're good. But the second I get too far away from a trash can to turn around, he poops again. And I'm like, you're doing this on purpose. You know what you're doing, and you're such a little turd about it.
They wait till you're like halfway through so you can't go back.
Yeah.
Like you just have to like carry it with you.
Oh, absolutely.
They know what they're doing.
He knows what he's doing, yes. So numerous studies argued for canine origins in places as diverse as East Asia, Mongolia, Siberia, Europe, and Africa, with timing varying from 15,000 to 135,000.
That's only like a little bit of a difference.
And then archaeologists who studied ancient canine burials were relegated to the sidelines, and their fossil records were dismissed as old school, which really pissed them off. It would piss me off too.
I mean, literally, like fossils are old school. That doesn't mean you should dismiss them.
That's so old. Like we don't do it. Yeah, you're right. This thing is like 5,000 years old. That's old as shit.
They're trying to find a common ground, but they're really failing because I think everybody wants to be the person that said they figured it out. Especially as technology is advancing, everybody's rushing to be the person that figures it out, and they're just like trampling over each other. And it ramped up in 2013 when UCLA evolutionary biologist Robert Wayne and his team published a comprehensive set of data suggesting that dogs evolved from a group of European wolves, now extinct, somewhere between 19,000 and 32,000 years ago. And then
they really didn't narrow it down much.
Yeah, not at all. And then just 2 years later, Peter Savolania, we're going to call him Sav. He was a molecular biologist, and his colleagues at the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm published convincing results indicating that dogs originated in China south of the Yangtze River. They estimated that this dog population split from wolves 33,000 years ago. So at least they don't have a range. They're just saying, we got it. But both
we're
teams,
picking a year. Yeah. We may be wrong, but we're picking something.
Yeah, like we got this. It's more convincing, right? And both teams were sequencing DNA. So it's wild that their findings are literally all over the map. But we'll get into why. So SAB's research team analyzed DNA samples from living global dog and wolf populations and then tracked the DNA backwards to try to figure things out. The general rule is that older a population of animals, the more diversity it has in its genome, which is the hallmark of ancient origin. So whether these animals represented the first domesticated dogs or rather dogs who migrated to the region from elsewhere and then split off a more ancient dog population is unresolved. They still don't know.
Oh, yeah, there's no way they're going to know because it's 33,000 years.
Mm-hmm. And fossil remains of the ancestral and probably extinct population of wolves that would have been indigenous to the area would seal the deal, but nobody's been able to find them yet. But like I said, with everything melting, we might find something in the next few decades, which would be kind of cool. So while Sav and his colleagues worked backwards in time, Wayne's group worked forward, tracking ancient DNA collected from prehistoric bones of wolves and wolf-like dogs, and then measuring decreasing genetic diversity. So as DNA becomes less diverse, it points to the animal transitioning from wolves to dogs. And then a dead end indicates that the lineage became extinct at that particular time. So Wayne's team sequenced ancient DNA on canid skulls and bone fragments discovered in present-day Siberia and the Czech Republic, dating between 27,000 and 33,000 years ago. Which blows my mind that we have skulls from that far away, too.
Right.
And the physical characteristics of the skulls were wider muzzles and 4 shortened jaws, suggesting that it was proto-dogs, not wolves. The canids may have looked similar to today's Arctic breeds, so like a Siberian Husky or a Greenland dog. So that's kind of interesting that they're still similar after like thousands. But they were actually probably larger, and those were big dogs to begin with, so that's kind of cool.
I was going to say, a toddler can ride a Siberian Husky into battle, no problem.
Yes, absolutely.
It's very intimidating when a toddler riding a dog comes at you screaming.
I'd run.
I mean, it would give me pause. No thanks, toddler.
Pause, I'd run. It's fine.
And although their findings were met with skepticism, the team said their data showed that domestic dogs originated from different wolf populations at different times in different places in a series of starts and stops. And they added living dogs are more closely related to the ancient extinct wolves than they are from modern wolves. Which,
I mean, that would make sense.
That makes sense because humans, like how we're related to, say, like apes and stuff, is that we share a common ancestor. We're not necessarily related to them, but we all share the same ancestor.
Like at one point, we kind of like just split off.
Yeah.
My fingers. There we go. I'm trying to illustrate. It's not working.
You try and find your camera, and you're like.
But in a little twist, Wayne's findings reignited the theory of parallel and multi-regional proto-domestication, which was the idea that Darwin kicked off.
That's how I would imagine it would be. Like, you see it with a lot of other species, like, yeah, particularly with Darwin, that he talks about how in different regions things develop differently. So why wouldn't the dogs do the same thing?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. All right, so both studies have critics. Some claim that diversity in Sab's ancient dog population is a result of a mixture of European dogs as people traverse the Silk Road. And those who criticize Wayne's study maintain that he has no solid proof that ancient bones he's studying are definitely wolf or dog, because they don't really know at this point. And additionally, the study is geographically biased because he excluded samples from China because he was convinced there were no ancient dogs there. So that's where he lost me. Like, you can't just say, like, I don't believe it, so I'm not going to look at it.
I mean, that's super biased right there. Like,
yeah,
your research may be semi-sound, but if you're ignoring an entire population, it's not that great.
Yeah, like, why wouldn't dogs develop there?
Yeah.
I mean, that's where humans kind of came. Like,
yeah, and domesticated cats came from Asia. So yeah, it makes sense. But although the two studies go two different directions, they might both be right in some aspects. It's possible that dogs were domesticated multiple times in different regions, and that most lineages died out when humans were faced with overwhelming challenges like climate change. So their findings aren't mutually exclusive either. Just because we can't prove it doesn't mean it's not right. And one reason for the disparities, according to Oxford's evolutionary biologist Gregor Larson, who was part of a team that successfully mapped the origin of the pig. So that's a fun thing to have on your resume.
Right.
He says is that scientists studying the dog are not including enough ancient DNA in their studies. So they're using like a small sample size and they could do more. So he, with a colleague, Keith Dobney, who was in archaeology at the University of Aberdeen, had the idea of bringing together all the evidence ever collected to find ancient specimens from museums and then apply state-of-the-art technology to create a database that was bigger than anything that anybody's ever seen before. And at this point, all they had to do was convince everybody to work together.
Like, I feel like that's the most reasonable thing, though. Like,
yeah, like everybody, like, I have, a skull or I have a femur. Like, everybody.
It's not going to be easy because scientists have egos bigger than doctors. But
oh yeah,
I'm imagining they brought in like a preschool teacher who was like, okay, everyone, today we're going to talk about teamwork. What's going to work? Teamwork. Say it with me, everyone, all together.
Sharing and teamwork. And
sharing
they had like a week-long class for preschoolers for these scientists.
And it had to have worked because somehow he was able to sell the idea of collaborating and cooperating, which might have been because this is like 2013 and everybody saw what happened in the 90s and nobody could get anything done. So I'm sure everybody's like, okay, fine. So he got more than 50 influential canine evolutionary scientists to join the project, including archaeologists, paleobiologists, zoo archaeologists, and paleogeologists, and a whole lot more. So a lot of different people from different fields actually agreeing to listen to each other, which is more incredible than finding out the answer, I guess. So these scientists compared genetic data from existing archaeological evidence, and this study went on for about 2013, and it looks like it ended around 2018, and found that man's best friend may have emerged independently from two separate, possibly now extinct wolf populations that lived on opposite sides of the Eurasian continent. This means that dogs may have been domesticated not once, as widely believed, but twice, which I believe pigs also were domesticated twice. They proved. There's one other animal that's twice. Everybody else was once.
You know what I also just realized? This whole story is the movie Breakfast Club. It's all a bunch of different people getting forced in a room together, and all they have to do is write an essay, and then they like come together and resolve their differences, and they write like and then they find the origin of dogs at the end, and they write like a really bitchy note to the principal.
I mean, that checks out. Now that you put it that way, it does make a lot of sense.
You two are crazy.
Yeah.
Now we just need to figure out which scientist was Ali Sheedy, because she was my favorite.
They reconstructed the evolutionary history of dogs by first sequencing the genome at Trinity College in Dublin, which is my favorite place in the world. Have you seen that library? Oh my Lord. So it was a 4,800-year-old medium-sized dog that was excavated at the Neolithic Passage tomb of Newgrange, Ireland. The team, including French researchers based in Lyon at the National Museum of Natural History in Paris, also obtained mitochondrial DNA from 59 ancient dogs living between 14,000 and 3,000 years ago. And then they compared them to the genetic signatures of more than 2,500 previously studied modern dogs. The results of their analysis demonstrate a genetic separation between modern dog populations currently living in East Asia and Europe. But curiously, this population split seems to have taken place after the earliest archaeological evidence of dogs in Europe. The new genetic evidence also shows a population turnover in Europe that appears to have mostly replaced the earliest domesticated dog population there, which supports the evidence that there was later arrivals of dogs from somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
It's all very confusing. And then lastly, a review of the archaeological record shows that early dogs appear in both the East and the West more than 12,000 years ago, but in Central Asia, no earlier than 8,000 years ago.
So they started on like the ends and moved inward.
Yeah. So
like a giant furry hug.
Yeah. And combined, these new findings suggest that dogs were first domesticated from geographically separated wolf populations on opposite sides of the continent. At some point after their domestication, the eastern dogs dispersed with migrating humans into Europe, where they mixed with mostly replaced the earliest European dogs. Most dogs today are a mixture of both eastern and western dogs. And one reason why genetic studies have been difficult to interpret, Larson said, quote, "Animal domestication is a rare thing, and a lot of evidence is required to overturn the assumption that it happened just once in a species. Our ancient DNA evidence combined with archaeological records suggests that we need to reconsider the number of times dogs were domesticated independently. Maybe the reason there hasn't been a consensus about where dogs were domesticated is because everyone is a little bit right." So I found that interesting. Instead of being like, everybody's wrong, he's like, no, I think we're all right. We just haven't cracked it completely.
Right.
And then
we all have our patches of the quilt, and we haven't found the thread to like piece it all together.
Yeah, but I like his mentality. Like, I think
very positive.
Yeah. And then Dr. France is also an author on this study. He said, quote, "Reconstructing the past from modern DNA is a bit like looking into a history book. You never know whether crucial parts have been erased. Ancient DNA, on the other hand, is like a time machine, and it allows us to observe the past directly."
I like that. And that's absolutely accurate, too.
Yeah.
The DNA doesn't lie. Maybe it doesn't tell the whole picture, but...
Yeah, and it's, not necessarily what it looks like, because we were talking about, like, one generation could have a massive evolution like Spike, so it's confusing. But if they can just figure out the patterns, they'll eventually get there. And there's a lot of questions that remain. There were no ancient American dogs included in this study. So, again,
still biasing people.
Yeah. And then there was France et al. He was a writer on this one, but he was also a writer on another study. He suggests that the two ancestor species were descended from the same initial wolf population that are now extinct. So he's like, I think you're on to, but I don't think it's, two different wolves. I think it's the same wolf. And then other scholars have investigated and found evidence to support migration events across Central Asia, but not for a complete replacement. So he's just like, I don't think they all dispersed and left. And he thinks that they just kind of sprinkled in and out. So again, we don't know. But as of January of this year, we may have known the how. So we don't know when yet, but we might know the how we started to domesticate. So according to the Scientific Journal, the humanity's bond with dogs began in northern Eurasia between 14,000 and 29,000 years ago, when much of the earth was still covered in ice, i.e. the Ice Age.
I can't help but laugh, like, when you give such a wide range.
I know, right?
But when you're talking that far back, that's totally appropriate,
It's still funny.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So plants were super scarce because it was the Ice Age, and prey was very lean because they were also not able to eat. So edible plants could have been stored in the winter as a source of carbohydrates, but supplies would have waned as the big freezes wore on. They were lacking a lot of food, and our hunter-gatherer ancestors could only get about 45% of their calories they needed to survive from eating lean meat, since too much can cause protein poisoning. Yeah, so human livers are not adapted to eating only protein, apparently, and that was all they were getting because the lean meat didn't have any fat.
I feel like someone needs to tell people on the keto diet.
Right?
Wait, so you mean my T-Rex diet will kill me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently, I had never heard of protein. I was today years old when I learned about protein poisoning.
So they figured out that they needed to add more fat to their diet. So they were trying to eat as much marrow and grease to supplement their diets as well, because they were having a bad time.
Right.
But to get enough fat, because all the animals were starving too, they had to overkill. So they were eating way more meat. They had more meat than they could eat. Ice Age hunters fed the excess meat to wolves, according to Maria Lahtinen, who is the lead author of this new study and an archaeologist with the Finnish Food Authority. So she's like a food archaeologist. Freaking badass. She says, quote, "The wolf and the human can form a partnership without competition in a cold climate. This would easily promote domestication." So the descendants of the leftover eating wolves eventually became the first domesticated dogs, according to her study. There was plenty of benefits to domesticated dogs. They can pull sleds, protect livestock, and protect you from other predators. But these are things they didn't know about yet. None of these became apparent until, the dogs were already domesticated for a really, really, really long time. The question was especially perplexing given that ancient humans and northern wolves have occupied the same area for like tens of thousands of years. And they had the same prey like caribou, rabbits, and deer. It struck many researchers unlikely that two species would have willingly chosen to cooperate, given that they were competing for food sources in the Ice Age. Here's another quote. "Humans have a tendency to try to eliminate their competitors. It never has been explained before why humans join forces with their competitor." And this is an understatement. So when humans arrived in Europe about 43,000 years ago, they pretty much wiped out every large carnivore that existed, including the saber-toothed cats and the hyenas. They had giant hyenas. Oh, yeah. So the fossil record doesn't reveal whether these large carnivores starved to death because modern humans took all their food, or if they picked them off on purpose because they were threats. But either way, Ice Age bestiary is extinct because people suck. There's also a hunting hypothesis that humans use wolves to hunt, but it doesn't hold up either. Humans were already successful hunters before this, so why would they need them? And wolves eat a lot of meat, so why would they take in something that's going to eat all your food source? So that was.
I don't think we're giving enough credit for how cute canines are. I really think that's a missing link here. Like, well, this dog's already eating my leftover meat, and it's kind of letting me pet it. And it's soft, and I'm into that. And look at the little face. I think that's it. People don't want to give credit to the cuteness factor.
Well, that might get into the next one, because the next theory is the one where they just captured puppies and like Stockholmed them until they domesticated.
That's so cute and so sad.
I almost wonder if the domestication was more accidental, and maybe the humans weren't necessarily purposely sharing their meat, but. Mm-hmm. But more like they were overkilling to get the fat they needed and then just leaving the carcasses behind. And then the wolves were just like, well, we're starving. Let's just follow the dead animals.
And that's similar to the next hypothesis, is that wolves were opportunistic scavengers that were attracted to the food waste that humans left behind. Problem with that thinking, according to this scientist, is that Ice Age humans didn't settle in one place long enough to leave consistent scraps for them to be attracted to.
I just figured
so that was her theory. And although an interesting fact about this theory is that it implies dogs domesticated themselves. So there is a theory that dogs were like, well, they got food, and when we're assholes, they don't give it to us. But when we're nice, they give it to us and they don't kill us. So it was like a theory that dogs were like, we'll figure this out. Like, we're gonna just be nice.
Modern dogs, 100%. You can see them working through issues like that.
Yeah. And so it's more plausible that our ancestors simply caught more prey than they could safely consume and chose to satiate their fellow predators rather than kill them off. That led to four-legged predators to stick closer and closer to people over time until they evolved into dogs, a process that probably took a really long time and took place about 12,000 years ago. And her research suggests that puts the range about where the previous one was at when they domesticated. So this one fits in with theirs. And friendliness caused strange things to happen to wolves. They started to look different. They got like floppy ears and different
Yeah, they developed a
colors
higher cuteness factor.
Yeah. And then, like I mentioned in your story, they also began to read people. They were able to read gestures, body language. You can even eye direction. Like if I dart my eyes, my dogs were like, "What are you looking at?" You know,
Right.
like they pick up on our gestures. But I'm going to get more to that next week. But I just think it's interesting the idea that humans were like, we can't eat all this food. Maybe we'll just give it to these things.
Maybe it was like, if I feed you, you're not going to kill me because you're full.
That's
And
true.
also I'm giving you food. I'm a food source.
Yeah.
But not in the eat my face kind of way.
Yeah, because like let's say the wolves are stalking the humans, and then maybe the humans are like, oh, if we give them this extra meat we're not eating anyways, they won't eat us.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. Smart, Emily.
Well,
Yeah.
we've seen animals that I would consider more wild not necessarily become domesticated, but form these really interesting relationships with humans. Like if you look at handlers at a zoo who know all of the alligators' personalities and their favorite treats and their behaviors, and you know, they build a relationship. And I'm like, if you told me an alligator could be a pet, I'd say you were full of shit. But we've seen these capabilities to form relationships with animals that would otherwise totally eat our faces off.
Oh, 1,000%.
Lions, tiger, I mean, they're just giant kittens.
Bears,
so.
oh my.
Bears, oh my.
When I went to the Houston Zoo, they were just walking a cheetah on a leash. And I was like, huh. Don't see that every day.
No. Unless you're like super rich and fancy, and then you can have a cheetah on a diamond leash.
Yeah.
Fucking Josephine Baker, man. She was a jazz performer.
She had a cheetah named Chiquita.
Named Chiquita.
Do you guys watch Archer? They have the awesome.
Yes. Babu. Where's Babu? Probably pissing on something I love.
I wanted to name the cat something after Archer, but then I was like, no, he's more of a sociopathic murderer.
Maybe your next dog.
Maybe. I love that show so much.
Name her, was it Duchess?
Yeah.
Man, well, thank you guys so much for joining me. This has been so much fun.
I've loved including all the dogs.
It's been fun. There's been so many fur babies.
It's funny because normally, like on our podcast, we're apologizing for the dogs making noise, and this time we're like, bring it on.
Yeah. It's in the theme. It's totally okay.
I heard the cheese barking outside the door, and my boyfriend's like, shush. And I'm like, no, it's fine. It adds authenticity to this whole episode. Let them bark.
To make their presence known.
Yes.
Yeah, it was the first time they were eating dinner that I'm not like, oh, I'm sorry. I was just like, nah, it's fine.
Thank you so much for having us. We always have such a fun time, and we're really excited to talk about dogs. And I think this is one of the first episodes we've ever done on any podcast where we haven't been strictly women's history. It was kind of nice to like go to different directions. So,
that's cool.
Yeah, so if you ever want us back, we'll come back. I mean, we'll come back anyway.
More woofers.
Yeah. There's no question. I want to thank my guest, Whining About Herstory, again for joining me for Dogs Part 2. I was so excited to learn about the Mercy dogs. And even as I was editing this, I was like tearing up again because it's so sweet. This was a very visual episode with our puppies. So if you would like to watch that, join Patreon. That's patreon.com/historicalafpod. And there are so many more benefits. Not only do you get to watch us live and comment along as we go, you get merch, you get things in the mail, you get to choose stories and random words, so many things. If you'd like to send in a story for the extra AF episode, that is historicalafpod@gmail.com. If you'd like to buy some merch, that is shop.spreadshirt.com/historicalafpod. And also, if you would like merch that I hand make myself, that's on my Etsy store. And I have some new stuff coming up this week I'm really excited about. I have some Rasputin dick jokes and then one wine glass that says I like history and maybe 3 people. Super pumped about it. And that's etsy.com/shop/Kina's Creations. And that's creations with a K. If you'd like there to just be one website to find all this information, guess who has time to remember all this? That is historicalafpodcast.com. And you don't have to join Patreon or buy merch to help me out. You can share this podcast with friends or give me a rating on iTunes, Podchaser, etc. Counteract those 1-star reviews I got from very unhappy Trumpsters. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next week for Dog History Part 3 with the podcast Harlots of History. Okay, bye.
Welcome to Talking Shiz. I am CJ.
And I am Maddox.
And our podcast is like a radio show. We have no certain topics. We talk about anything and everything. And our opinions don't matter. And we do have a pod page. What is our pod page where folks can find our platforms and what we're all about? Maddox?
I'm glad you asked. As a matter of fact, that is podpage.com/talking without a G dash shiz. And that's where it's our one-stop shop. It has everything there. It has all of our donation links. It has all of the content that we have created, our recent related reviews, and it even gives you where you can find us on different applications such as Google, iHeartRadio, you name it. We're in almost in every single branch of applications out there, so please check it out. There's even, if you want to become an official Shizzler, we even have merchandise. So definitely go there, check it out, and yeah, it's literally the best one-stop shop.
Absolutely, and sharing is caring, so make sure you guys share. We're on Twitter, and that's talking_shiz, Instagram, talking_shiz. We have Facebook, we got our pod page, we have different platforms, Apple Music, Spotify, what Maddox said, we are everywhere. So definitely check us out, and we definitely appreciate you guys listening.
Yes, thank you guys, and we'll see you on one of our episodes.